like you said, he's got 3 rings, right? And just to clarify, none of those rings are with Toronto, right?
Is Fraser Minton going to have more points than Slafkovsky this year? Fraser Minton sucks at hockey. This guy might not even be an NHLer, so we got to settle down on that one.
Adelaide, no. Minus 160 on will they show her holding a drink in her hand.
They are 2 points behind the St. Louis Blues in the wild card, and they are.
Oh, the Blues are dog water. The Blues suck. The Blues are the worst of those 4 teams that I mentioned by a mile.
And
they're not a good hockey team.
Care, like have some set of balls, have some response, have some pride for what the hell goes on the ice. It's so absurd.
I'm looking forward to the parade, but that's going to be later in the year.
I'd rather have so money in that than have Alber Soderblom. I would rather stack a bunch of garbage that I have in the corner of my room over here than have Alber Soderblom in that. He's
June 21st, welcome back to Edgework, presented by Pinnacle. I'm Zack Phillips, joined here today by So Money, Alex B. Smith, and Matt Russell. We'll be talking about what went on in Game 5. We'll break down Game 6, the numbers that we're seeing up on the board right now, and the hottest topic in the NHL right now, the Conn Smythe Trophy. Who will win? Who can win? Who deserves to win? And what bets might be out there that might still be worth making some plays on right now. But before we get into all that, before we can answer some questions from the chat, I do want to remind people that today's show, as always, is brought to you by Pinnacle Sportsbook. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sportsbook in business for 25 years. You can find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. You must be 19 plus. Please play responsibly. And remember, it is not available in the US. But as we bring this up here on screen today, as we're talking about prices, Game 6 game, as we're talking about series prices, the prices that we're going to be referring to, and a lot of time the best prices available are going to be at Pinnacle Sportsbook. So make sure to add it to your list of outs today. Gentlemen, let's get into it. Game 5, we get a Edmonton Oilers win out there in Florida, sending this one back to Edmonton. We get a little bit of a back and forth action. There's a late push from the Panthers. It feels like that thing was potentially going to be tied up late in that game. But Matt, now we're sitting here, 3-2 series. Felt like it was pretty much wrapped up. I mean, obviously you have to win the 4th game, but where are you at now after looking at this series and what's gone on in the last 2 games?
Well, I got to tell you, listen, first of all, glad to be back. It's June 21st. Where am I at? I'm at, it's summertime, guys. You guys can play all the hockey you want, but let's just move on with this. We got to clear the deck here. Alex B has to address the garbage in the corner of his room. He needs some time off. We got to move on from this season, guys. No, honestly, I'm more of... not rocket science here. I'm way more into this series than I was before. Since last I was on, I had a traumatic event. Of course, that was the Stars losing to the Oilers, and I needed some time. I needed some time after that traumatic event. And games 1 and game 2, honestly, I didn't even watch game 1. Didn't bet on 1, didn't bet on 2. Got back in on 3 and 4. Bet on the Oilers, split those. But game 5 really kind of got the juices flowing again, where, you know what, maybe we can wait a little bit for summer. Maybe we can find some value here, because the whole Conn Smythe market that night, you guys know, because you're on a chat with me, I was just absolutely enthralled with everything that was going on. So, I'm actually really excited for this game tonight. I don't necessarily have a bet on it because, as we'll get into here in a little bit, the work was done in a lot of ways during that game, strangely enough, in Game 5. So I'm just, again, it's one more game, maybe 2 more games. I'm back in on hockey here. I needed a week and a half off to get me fired back up again. And I needed a break before the actual break. Yeah, I'm pumped up for the game tonight. I think it's going to be really fun, obviously.
So, Money, is this better or worse for you now that the team that knocked out the Vancouver Canucks is in the Stanley Cup final and making an actual push here against the Panthers?
Oh, it's I'm indifferent to that. Yeah, that doesn't matter to me. I'm more I agree with Matt here. I think that as the series has gone on, I've actually become a little bit more invested in it, and also the whole Conn Smythe. See, look at my thing there, right?
Yeah, right there.
I am nicely positioned in many different aspects now that Bob has potentially dropped out of the running here. Sorry to Moretto, But yeah, if Bob won, it would not have been a good situation for me. So I'm nicely positioned, and I'm really enjoying this. I think that there's a lot to say about the Oilers, right? Like I talked about this before during the Canucks series. I've gone back and looked, right? There was a dominant Kings year, the year they beat the Devils. Like besides '94 and 2011, like I don't remember the years anymore. But it was a year that they beat the Devils, and they just dominated that whole playoff, right? So oh nice, Ukraine scored, beauty, right? So it was the year that it was the year that they dominated the Devils. Um, I couldn't remember a more dominant run than that, right? And I still haven't seen something like that where they just blew through every team, including the Canucks. What I haven't seen this year is a team that the Oilers just have this switch, and they can turn it on and then they can go off as well, right? We saw them go off against the Canucks where they just didn't look good for like a period of time there. And then I have no idea what happened in the first intermission of game 6. They came out in that second period and there was some sort of switch. And that carried on until the Dallas series where it turned off a little bit. And then the last 3 games, it came back on. Then it came off against the Panthers for a little bit, and now we're back, right? So it's fascinating to me how this team can just turn it on out of nowhere, and I have never seen that for a extended period of time, pretty much during a whole playoff run.
Well, you could argue that the switch turned off before the end of the Stars series. They had 10 shots in a winning effort in game 6, right? Like their 10 shot performance, when if they lose, they then have to go back to Dallas for game 7 against a coach who's never lost a game 7 in like 8 or 9 tries, as we've documented on this show, right? And it's like, I don't know, right? Like on, off, whatever. But I think, isn't that just kind of sports? Right, where you're asking these teams in series to just win 4 out of 7, where you can kind of take a game off. And I think the biggest issue, and for tonight's game, for sort of shifting to that angle, like my price to bet the Oilers at home in this series is like -124. So there are some better prices out there, and I should be in theory looking to bet the Oilers. But that switch that you talked about, so many, where most teams do go on and off and on and off, and that we're asking the Oilers here to win 4 straight games. Listen, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I try to keep learning as I get older. And the one thing that I took away from last year's postseason, and it's funny because it wasn't the Stanley Cup final, but it was the Dallas-Vegas series, the infamous Dallas-Vegas series, where Vegas takes a 3-0 lead, or I should say the Stars go down 3-0. And I think we all thought Dallas was the better team. I think they played like the better team throughout that series, but again, they just did not win those first 3 games. And then they win game 4 and they win game 5. And we're like, okay, here we go. Like now the better team is sort of like showing itself. And of course, fast forward to this year, essentially almost the exact same thing happened, where they lose the first 2 games and then the better team sort of shows itself. But the difference between this year and last year in that series is last year they got down 0-3, this season they got down 0-2. And that 0-2 and the fact that they won game 3 bought them a chance to go down and have one game where they could have a dip, because they weren't afforded that when they went down 0-3. And so the point of this is that the Oilers going down 0-3 does not afford them the dip that you'd like to be able to have. You'd like to be able to turn the switch off or dim it a little bit and not have to be like the mega desperate team. And so my concern here for the Oilers is, yes, even though they're at home and the crowd should have them going and all of that stuff, like Dallas was at home for that game 6 last year as well. My concern is, like, how do you keep bringing it every single time, right? And you can't fake desperation. And so Florida wasn't particularly desperate in game 4. They certainly were a lot better in game 5. But again, when you're not facing elimination, you're not going to be as desperate. And then, yes, Florida's still not facing elimination. But, like, I think they've certainly gotten the scare in them. And so, if Florida matches Edmonton's desperation or even gets a little bit closer to it, you look at these last 2 games, like, from a metric standpoint, expected goals, even strength play, high danger chances, and stuff like that, Florida and Edmonton have been pretty even. Like every puck went in the net in game 4 for Edmonton. Like that was a Bobrovsky issue. And then in this past game, obviously a Bobrovsky issue. And by the way, a McDavid issue in both these games, right? Him being so good has carried them to victory. It's why he's going to win the Conn Smythe Trophy. But like Florida just has to get like that much little bit better. And I don't know that Edmonton can get any better or any more desperate, right? And I just worry that this price that we're seeing and money coming in on Florida, which early on I thought would come in on Florida, because if you just like the Oilers, why not just bet McDavid when after the game he was, plus 130, plus 100, even minus 150? Like, why would you ever bet the Oilers in game 6 when those prices are available? Now that they're like minus 350 out there, now if you really like the Oilers, maybe there's some time here to come in and bet it. But I'm just concerned that they're not going to be able to increase their level even higher, where I think Florida can. And again, these games have not been blowouts from like a 5-on-5 perspective. So I'm concerned for the Oilers tonight from that that side of things, that and more evenly played game might not go their way.
Alex B, we haven't heard from you yet over the last little while just about this series and just where we're at now. Series price, I mean, we're watching this thing swing back and forth. Going into game 5, we saw the Oilers sitting there plus 725, Panthers minus 1044. Now we're seeing the Oilers plus 273, Panthers minus 327 over at Pinnacle Sportsbook. Like big swings back and forth. Obviously, a lot of that is just going to have to do with where the game's being played. We're back in here in Edmonton, home ice tonight for the Oilers, an opportunity to tie this thing up. It feels like we're looking at potentially a very different series here now going into this game. Do you feel like there's momentum behind the Oilers? Like there's something to that and the fact that they are at home, or is this just a Panthers team that's going to overpower them here?
Well, there's definitely momentum on the Oilers side. Obviously, Matt made a great point about when you're playing with the desperation and you're finally able to get that first win, get that second win, and now press the team that had been dominating the majority of the series. Like I said, now you've evened the playing field. And like I said, even though this is a game 6, it's not an elimination game per se for Florida. They have to treat this as such, because you don't want to be the team that had a 3-0 lead and now here you are tied 3-3, game 7, even if you go back home. But to be in this spot, this historic spot that it would become at that point, now you've shifted all the pressure that was on Edmonton before this series started. It's now all on Florida at this point. And so now we might see, like you said, we're definitely seeing a different Oilers team, but now we could see a different Panthers team come out as well. Now, as somebody who has Panthers futures going back to March, had the series to end in 5, and I have plus 500 for tonight for the series to end in 6 games in Florida's favor. There's not really much for me to add on per se in this game. However, with that being said, you're trying to, especially gauging with the Conn Smythe predicament at this point. Like I said, it's all McDavid at this point. I have a plus 450 with Bobrovsky. It's now 10-1 for a reason, because with what McDavid has done this entire postseason, it's certainly worthy of him winning the trophy, whether the team wins or loses. It's been a tremendous run, and certainly the fact that he's elevated himself in this series and in the games where Edmonton's had to come back to win in these desperation moments, that's really what shines out. So unless Bobrovsky were to come out and have a 45 save shutout tonight, which I don't think could happen at all, then it's pretty much McDavid's award to win at this point. So like I said, your value's kind of gone out of there. And if you have positions one way or the other as far as the series goes, there's not really much to jump in on with this game. So it's maddening as a Panthers backer, and I'm sure Panthers fans have to be beside themselves, because you have a team 3-0. You want to show that killer instinct to put them away. Like you said, this is an Edmonton team that has been resilient. We've seen them bounce back. Their whole season's been a bounce back. I mean, this team was dead in the water when they fired Woodcroft, and then they make this big run. So you wonder, has all this steam and momentum, can it continue on to the very end for Edmonton, or can it just kind of fizzle out because they're at home? And now the pressure, like I said, of them being the team with the momentum on their side, can things revert back and kind of be like what Somebody said, where this team somehow finds a way to turn it off, even though they've had it on for the last 2 games?
Well, and the one thing I should mention, right, that's different from just the example that I gave, Stars in Vegas. And by the way, that example applies, Rangers, Canes, and you know, and all the and probably every other down 0-3 series that a team, you know, at least showed some sort of ability to maybe come back in, right? Is the schedule for the Stanley Cup Finals giving these teams 2 days off? You know, on the surface, when you talk about momentum, right, it feels like that should help Florida kind of regroup from getting kind of punched in the face a couple of times here. But I actually kind of think it helps Edmonton because they're the team that has to go from like being up here and then like, okay, like we got to get back up here for the next game. Having that extra day to sort of like decompress and then ramp back up versus a scenario where, you know, you're playing game 5, day off, game 6, day off, game 7, like 3 games in 5 nights to try to win all those 3. Like, I think Edmonton can win 4 straight games against the Florida Panthers, right? I've obviously already won 2, but it's the issue of stacking them on top of each other that, you know, in a short period of time that is a problem. But as we know here, by the fact that it's June 21st and we still haven't figured the Stanley Cup thing out, is that these games are so spread apart, they start to become individual type things, right? Momentum doesn't necessarily shift from one day to the next, but that actually might be a good thing for Edmonton because like they might need the extra day to get, you know, sort of fired up. And we saw that in the Vancouver Edmonton series where it's like those games going back and forth, like no team won twice in a row until Edmonton did at the end. So like momentum wasn't exactly, you know, flying all over that series, right? And so you know, the one good thing here when, you know, relative to the idea of Edmonton having to keep up this pace that they're on or this desperation that they're on is that they do get some time to kind of get down and then get back up again. Again, I just worry, you know, Bobrovsky, you know, hard to imagine that he can play as bad for a 3rd straight game. And like I said, like, and you know, I think Paul Maurice talked about it after game 5, where he's just like, you know, we're a little bit disappointed here, but like we're playing a pretty good game. And, you know, if they keep playing that good game with a little added desperation and all that stuff, then yeah, it's concerning. So, you know, when we say like, oh, I don't have a bet on the game tonight and people are watching and they're hoping to bet on the game and like, you know, I can only tell you what I know, right? I know that the price is valuable to me on Edmonton, but I just have some concerns that I'm walking like dead into a trap based on the idea that like this team cannot keep getting up for it, even though back off on the other side, that like the rest might be helping them as well.
Well, so Money, where are you at here on the price for tonight's game? We see the Oilers -120, the Panthers +111 right now, 5.5 straight across the board. Pinnacle Sportsbook currently holding a -103 on the over 5.5. You just look at these prices, you're looking at where we're at back in Edmonton. Feels like we're pretty much getting very similar to what we've had on a game-to-game basis, but it's just getting a little bit tighter as we've gone on in this series, whether either side, just depending on home ice.
Before I talk about the game tonight, Matt said something that has really struck a nerve with me. He mentioned the games off, right? So the days off between games. So this brings me to Canucks story time.
Oh God, 1994 finals. Here we go.
So let's gather around here.
Gather around, everybody.
So I mentioned last week that I don't believe in momentum carrying over from game to game. I don't. What I do believe in is that there's certain elements within a series where injuries they kind of linger, and there's the extra day that can benefit certain teams. The Rangers got that extra day in 94 between game 6 and 7, right? That is a very big reason, in my opinion, when the Canucks had them on the ropes, that they got that extra day to kind of emotionally recover, as well as kind of some of their lingering injuries that they had after. Even though Mark Messier attempted to decapitate Trevor Linden in Game 6, so it just reminded me of that. So. Thanks, Matt, for taking me back there.
And that's why I think about this type of stuff, man. This is ingrained in ourselves from childhood. Like we got to be on our head. We got to have heads on swivels here when it comes to this rest momentum talk, right? And we learned that when we were, you know, some of us were 12 years old.
Yeah. So that was rough. Now for tonight's game, I think it's fair. I think that the Oilers. It is a big adjustment from where we saw the Oilers being priced in Game 4. Well, no, in Game 3, right? So but you had the premiums built into that for a team down 0-2. Now you have. Now it's fair. I think that the Oilers being a small favorite at home, that is where they should be. I am interested in the total. There's really nothing I see based on the way that both teams would like to play this game that would suggest to me that that we're gonna have a low scoring game here. So I do think that the goals do continue. Matt mentioned about Bobrovsky. If we go back to Bobrovsky, throughout his whole career, besides the Leafs, he's had trouble stringing together the consistently good games over a long period of time, right? So whatever was happening with him going into this Florida series, that was actually an exception for him, right? We've also talked about where after every few games, he has a clunker, right? We've seen that twice in a row. We've also seen him throughout his career where he can just lose it as well, right? So I don't know if he has another bad game. This is one of those situations where kind of predicting goaltenders becomes even more difficult for me as well, because Bobrovsky is one of those guys that he could lose it altogether, right? Skinner, we've talked about Skinner. We don't have to get into it. We know how I feel about Skinner. The kid's a gamer, right? But I do think that 5.5, a flat 5.5 that we're seeing, is still a little bit low here. So I do like the over 5.5. It's going to be. I've played it small. I don't. Where we are right now in terms of pricing and with these lines being up for a couple of days now, I think that I'm not ready to go full on it, but I did play small on the over 5.5. Unless if there's any counter to that, I think that I'd be okay to lock that in if the other guys are okay with it.
Alex, Matt, you guys have any objections to that?
No objections here. No.
All right.
I'm all for the concept of Skinner giving up a ton of goals.
The kid's a gamer. The kid's a gamer. We've seen him as the series progresses. I don't know if he's better at getting a book on players, if it's coaching. I'm not sure what it is at this point, but we see his numbers improve as the series goes on, and he's got that it factor, right? Like the kid's a gamer. Love him. I love
it factor, gamer, like so money. Like look at you, just deep into the qualitative analysis here. Where's quantitative? Like, let me know when the save percentage it cracks 900, my man. Like, let's get there first before we start assigning gamer qualities to your boy.
You know, the thing I've learned in my illustrious goaltending career is that you can have bad games, but it's when you give up the goals, right? So you can give up 4 goals. If it's 4-4,
corollary.
Yeah. If it's 4-4, don't give up that 5th goal.
Yeah.
It's fair. Sure. We're all just like, yeah. I mean, probably. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, don't lose. Don't do it. Don't give up more goals than the other guy. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll lock in the over 5.5, minus 103 for a half unit there. No objections from the rest of the crew. One thing that I do want to talk about before we get out of here today, the Conn Smythe markets. This has been a hot topic, whether it's in the Edgework group chat, if it's on Twitter, if it is on radio, on TV, it doesn't matter. This is what everybody's talking about right now. And I saw a question here in the chat, or some Rich put in here. Can you lose in 6 and get the Conn Smythe? Well, let's talk about that. Connor McDavid and his Conn Smythe campaign. Alex, we'll go to you first. We've talked about McDavid, the run that he's been on here so far in the playoffs. You want to talk about a magical run? 23 games played, 42 points. Just for comparison, if people don't understand how ridiculous that is, there's a certain player who was traded the other day who makes $8.5 million a year. He played 80 games last season, and he accumulated 40 points throughout the season. So that would be about 60 more games played, and he put up 40 points. Connor McDavid, 23 games, 42 points here in the playoffs, and that is against the toughest competition that you can find in the Stanley Cup playoffs here. Alex, one of the biggest discussions, it's not necessarily been, has Connor McDavid been good enough? Has he been the best player? Has he been that valuable? It's more so come down to, has he done enough to win the trophy despite the possibility of his team losing? Is this something you think we could see happen for the first time in a long time here this year?
Yeah, I really do believe that. I mean, and the proof is in the numbers. 42. He's contributed to 42 of Edmonton's goals this postseason. So if he's not there, they're done in the first round. Essentially, that's what that means. He has put them on his back and has carried them all the way through. Now, it's funny because we went through the same thing in this postseason we went through the regular season. He had that 11-game stretch where he didn't score a goal, and we're just acting like he's completely invisible on ice. But he had 22 assists during that stretch. You're still contributing to goals. So we kind of talk out of both sides at this point where we say, well, he hasn't scored any goals. He doesn't have any big highlights. It's like he doesn't need highlights. He has 42 fucking assists. Like, he's helping the team out every single night. He's the one doing mostly everything. He's not putting it in and finishing it, but he's starting it. So that's all you got to do. And when you compare that to who the best player has been for every other team that was in the playoffs, no one has been more important to their team than Connor McDavid. So by the letter of the law of that award, he should win the Conn Smythe.
Fair enough. I mean, as far as the Conn Smythe discussion has gone, Moretto, I was trying to get him on here today because I wanted to hear his thoughts on this after or before Game 5. He was talking about, nope, can't do it. He's not going to get it. Matt, now sitting here, it just feels like it's inevitable. It's inevitable that this is going to be the case.
Yeah, well, and listen, obviously Alex made all of the points with regards to pro McDavid or sort of McDavid-centric stuff. I mean, he literally just spends the entire game putting pucks on platters for guys. Corey Perry, Zach Hyman, he should be signing every bruise on Zach Hyman's body and, essentially, signing off on every goal that Zach Hyman scores in front of the net. And I make the case a handful, if not most, of Draisaitl's as well. So the issue is never like, okay, how great is McDavid? The issue where the sort of stars are aligning here, and I should sort of mention here, do a quick victory lap. I've been talking about the concept of McDavid being the only guy who can win the Conn Smythe Trophy on a losing team in the Stanley Cup Final for 4 years now. There is documented written proof. In 2021, I wrote an article talking about how McDavid was a good bet to win the Conn Smythe Trophy because not only should his odds never be longer than his team to win the Stanley Cup, because there was never a world in which the Oilers were going to win the Stanley Cup and he wasn't going to be great. And if he is even close to great, he is going to win the award, right? So there's value already relative to the Oilers winning the Stanley Cup every single year. And then there's the whatever percentage, non-zero percentage chance that he's so great, which we saw 2 years ago in making the Western Conference Final, that his numbers are so great that they just give him the award anyway. And these teams win the Stanley Cup because a lot of people do a lot of awesome stuff. And Florida has a lot of people doing a lot of awesome stuff. But that's the other issue, because the other issue is there is no alternative on Florida. Like, this isn't like Nathan McKinnon v. Connor McDavid, where it's like, well, clearly the one star on the other side is the obvious nominee. Bobrovsky was the favorite because it was like, well, none of the skaters are even remotely close to McDavid. So we have to go to a completely different category for somebody on Florida to win. And then Bobrovsky starts kind of kicking it around. And the thing with Bobrovsky and why, Moretto and I was in on that too, why you were able to get 25 to 1 on Bobrovsky halfway through the playoffs was because his numbers were kind of only okay. They were not trending to the level of previous goaltending Conn Smythe Trophy winners. And then he had a really great series against the Rangers, right? And it's like, okay, well, now all of a sudden we have to find somebody on Florida to, if they're going to be the favorite for the Stanley Cup, if they're going to win the first 3 games, we have to have somebody on the team win it. And so because he was playing well enough, he was kind of the default guy, with the secondary default guy being Alexander Barkov. And that's the other element to the craziness of Tuesday night and this market in general over the last week, is that Barkov just kind of just doesn't do anything. And everybody just kind of goes like, well, if it's not Bobrovsky, I guess it's Barkov, because he's leading them in points, or he was until Tkachuk passed him, by 1 at 21 points. Meanwhile, McDavid's up to 42 in the game on Tuesday night. And you're just like, why is Barkov up there? Like, I get obviously two-way player. Like, I'm not saying he's not a great player and not the most contributing to the team, but just the idea, this just sort of narrative concept, the reverse narrative, that like we can't give it to a guy who's on the losing team. This isn't the NBA Finals MVP, where you play in 4, 5, 6 games and that's it. This is supposed to encompass the entire playoffs. And McDavid, overtime winner in game 1 against Dallas. Obviously, the absurd highlight goal in the clincher against Dallas. And then obviously these last 2 games where he's just been, absolutely off the rails. And so, can he win it? Of course, he is going to win it because there isn't another option on Florida. But the other thing is people cooking up these stories about like, well, maybe if Bobrovsky saves 50 and has a shutout, it's like, honestly, I kind of think it's too late for Bobrovsky. And I think for Florida, the only guys that you have to be worried about doing something outrageous are Barkov or Tkachuk. And it's interesting because those 2 guys do not have the same odds right now. Barkov around plus 400, plus 450. There's even a plus 500 available out there. And Tkachuk is pretty much widely at 40-1. Both those guys are just as likely to have 2-3 goals tonight and kind of steal that award away if you were ever going to give it to somebody other than McDavid. But the problem is, unlike Bobrovsky, where if he's the favorite, but he has a couple bad games, you can knock him down. There's not really anything that McDavid can do to get knocked down. McDavid is impervious to being bad. Most forwards are, because when you're bad, if you're bad, you're just kind of not seen on the ice. Well, McDavid's always seen on the ice, right? Even his worst game. What's his worst game of the playoffs so far, right? Game 1 in Vancouver, he gets absolutely no shots on goal in a loss. However, So Money and I were at that game together, and every time he had the puck, I was asking So Money to hold me. Because I didn't want anything to do with Connor McDavid or having the puck, and it was constant danger. And even in his own zone, it's like he's about to take off, go fully down the ice, and ruin our lives out here. So please just let me cry my eyes out here. And so he's not going to play bad tonight. He's going to be like, yes, maybe they stop him. Maybe he goes pointless and it's a 3-1 game or 4-1 game or whatever. But the die is already cast, man. Like, and every time that these great games happen and this break that we have, it's just an extra day for people to talk about them. And so these guys who are voting, the Pro Hockey Writers Association, I hope I'm getting that correct. Yeah, these guys, their minds are made up at this point. Like, and the point of McDavid also being a guy capable of not only putting up the stats, to be a guy who can win from a losing side, is that like people want to vote for Connor McDavid to do stuff. This isn't, like a really hot run by, Jonathan Marchessault or, something like that. This is like the guy, and people will be fine looking back on it and being like, well, the trivia question, who was the last guy to win the Conn Smythe, right? It's like from a losing team. And it's like, I'm a little tired of saying J.S. Jaguar, right? And even Ron Hextall before that. It's like, okay. And like Reggie Leach, it's like, okay. Cool. Like Connor McDavid is befitting of a guy who would be the answer to this trivia question. And, you say, okay, like we've never seen this before. We've never seen a guy like straight up double everybody else, every other opposing player in points. Yeah. Like, and by the way, like surpassing and breaking Wayne Gretzky records, which obviously came at a different time in a different era with a different supporting cast than McDavid has now. Like this is a legendary performance, and it should be treated as such and honored as such by winning the Conn Smythe Trophy. And I wouldn't have necessarily felt that way if they had lost Game 5, or if they had lost Game 5 in a way, the 3-1, 4-1 type of deal where he wasn't outstanding. But honestly, by the time he put that goal in, and certainly by the time that he put that puck on a platter for Corey Perry, the jam was done. And we talked about it in the chat, that the odds are still like plus 275. And I'm like, that's ridiculous, because even if you think this series needs to go 7, the Oilers are going to be around minus 130, minus 120 to win Game 6. And last time I checked, plus 275 was a much better price than minus 130. So having seen, the third period and having gotten through and seen all how McDavid's been treated in the media and talked about and all this stuff, I think it's over, man. I think we don't even need the Oilers to win tonight. And so again, going back to like not having a bet on the money line here, I'm just sitting back and just going, all right, play the game. Let's see what happens. Like, I guess I'm hoping against a Barkov hat trick, who, by the way, has not been the same player since Leon Draisaitl sort of fake elbowed him. He felbowed him against the boards in that, I believe it's game 1 or game 2. I don't see it happening, man. I don't see that anybody stealing it. I think Florida potentially raises the cup tonight, but I think everybody is happy to give Connor McDavid the Conn Smythe Trophy.
So money. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
I just wanted to just quickly touch on a point that Matt mentioned. And like I said, the writers have made up their minds. The thing you have to remember about the Conn Smythe Trophy is that it's also a popularity contest as well.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
Case in point being, look at Tampa Bay a couple of years ago. Their back-to-back runs. Braden Point could have easily won the Conn Smythe in both of those years. But they went with Victor Hedman because he was a hot name. They went with Vasilevsky because he was a hot name. Even though all three of those guys did enough to win that award, sometimes it just boils down to, one, is a popularity contest. Two, they don't even like giving the award to somebody twice. So those things also have a factor into it. So when you look at Florida, where they had 4 legitimate players who could, if they were playing anybody else, if Edmonton got knocked out, and we're talking about Vancouver here, we're talking about Dallas here, then you can go, oh, we got 1 of 4. And the reason why Bobrovsky would have stood out, and the reason why he stood out to me, and I think others who did bet Bobrovsky, is because he's the goaltender, and the goalies always get the eyes. The goalies are always kind of shined upon in the playoffs. Either you have the best player or the best goaltender. So the goaltender kind of breaks that 3-way logjam that you had with Tkachuk and Verhaeghe and Barkov. So I think that's another reason with that as well.
Yeah, it's a different category, right? When you don't have a skater that's that obvious, even a sort of substandard for a Conn Smythe statistically goaltender is going to be where we look. And by the way, like, if it's not for McDavid absolutely vibing his face off out there, Bobrovsky probably looks a lot better in these last 2 games, right? The numbers probably look a lot better for Bobrovsky. The goals are obviously fewer, right? So like, those 2 things are counteracting each other. Like, I don't care what happens tonight. You can't look at this series of these playoffs entirely in their entirety and be like, yeah, Bobrovsky just better than McDavid. Or by the way, like Barkov better than McDavid, or Tkachuk better than McDavid. Again, I don't care what happens tonight, right? Because like Tkachuk went like 10 games without a goal before he came alive in that last game. And again, like Barkov right now, for me, the lasting image of this series of Barkov is getting beat by Connor Brown on that shorthanded goal, and kind of giving up on the play and sauntering back when he knew that Brown was in alone. Like, he was the guy kind of really half-assing it after, from the blue line in, not even kind of trying to, get a slash on Connor Brown or this, that, or whatever. No, man, like, you can't look yourself in the eye and say, like, from an MVP of the playoff standpoint, that anybody's even remotely close to Connor McDavid. And it would be just an out-and-out farce if he wasn't given the award tonight. Or, of course, Monday.
So, Money, I'll give you one final opportunity here to weigh in on the Conn Smythe conversation. You got 99 problems. Conn Smythe ain't one. Why is that?
Yeah, I'm positioned nicely for what I think is going to happen for the Conn Smythe. I do agree with the guys that it is Connor McDavid's award. It is his legacy award as well, and that touches on kind of what Alex B was saying as well. That being said, I do think that there is a slight chance for Barkov. There's a very narrow path coming into this series. Barkov's case was predicated on kind of who he's been shutting down in the first 3 series. Well, obviously, we're not seeing that with Connor McDavid. If we see a situation where the Panthers blow them out, and I'm saying significantly blow them out with Barkov going off, that is the narrow possibility for him, because now we have a case for Barkov where he shut down the guys that he needed to in the first 3 series, and when they needed him the most, he wasn't able to shut down the generational player, but he stepped up to get the points and get the goals that he needed in the closeout game to deliver the Stanley Cup. So that's the narrow path that Barkov has. I don't think it's going to happen, because I don't think the Panthers are going to completely blow them out tonight. If the Panthers win, it's going to be their grinding style in a low-scoring theoretically a low-scoring game. McDavid, Rich asked a question earlier in the chat. Can a player win on a losing team or in Game 6? Right. In this case, yes. Right.
This player can.
Because of who and what McDavid is. Right. We've never seen someone on a losing team win in like a 6-game series. We've never seen someone bring a team to Game 6 completely by himself, right? So that is the case for McDavid. If it's a close game, if the Panthers win in a close game, I still think McDavid gets his. This is his legacy award. The voters are not going to take it away from him at this point. The narrative is all there, and we need to, as voters, right, from the voters' perspective, the guy needs his legacy at this moment right now, and I think that it is McDavid's award.
So just to hop in really quickly, I have two sort of comment/questions. Number one is, do you think it matters that they're playing in Edmonton and therefore McDavid can avoid Barkov more than he can in Florida, and therefore if Barkov's less likely to get credit for shutting him down tonight? And do you get credit for shutting him down in one game where he just had like 8 points in 2 games before that? Right. And secondly, like you're saying you're in a and this is kind of for everybody else, but like so many, you're saying that you have a position on Barkov so that if he wins, you're going to be fine. If you didn't have a position on Barkov tonight, stay with me here. Instead of the plus 400, plus 450 for him to win the Conn Smythe, is there a single game parlay that we can cook up for better odds that has all those things included that like need to happen for Barkov? So like obviously Panthers money line would be in that same game parlay. And to what degree, what would you feel comfortable with from Barkov perspective? Is it over 1.5 points? Is it over 2.5 points? Is it anytime goal? Like, how do we cook this up to get it to be better? If we were, if I wanted to hedge my McDavid position, how do I get, what do we need? What do we think Barkov needs to steal it from McDavid? And therefore, what should we include in a same game parlay? Is it, do we want to play it safe? Like, is it 2 points? Does he need 3? And if so, if he gets those 2 points and Florida wins, we win that bet. But we also are still, in my opinion, very much live to win the McDavid award, a Conn Smythe award, right? So, like, I don't want to simply hedge. I would like to throw together sort of a very sort of simple same game Barkov, being awesome parlay here to be able to win both in this case. So, what do you think the standard is, guys?
Yeah. So, sorry, Alex. So, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'll just go first because I gotta actually roll a little bit. So I would say, go with Florida tied in with either Barkov to get 2 goals or Barkov to get 3 points. Like he'd have to have that kind of a monster night for him to try to overtake McDavid, and obviously it'd have to be a win. Now you can't have, even if he had 5 points and they lose and it goes to Game 7, it means nothing. So you have to have it tied in with the win.
Yeah, totally. Right. So I was just because the way I'm thinking, it's like, okay, maybe a goal and over, goal and over 1.5 points or something along those lines, right? Like if you think it has to be 3 points, like obviously that increases the odds, and I'm super into that. Obviously I'd be a little bit, worried that he scored twice and you only got to 2 points, but that's why you include a goal in there. Anyway, this is for sort of the people who have the McDavid tickets and that sort of thing and are worried about Barkov and maybe again winning both, which like we're trying to win as many bets as we can here and not just give away good equity on a bet that you may have made before this playoff started, before the series started, or as we talked about halfway through the game on Tuesday.
Before I go, let's give Alex. Alex needs to head out, right?
Yeah, I gotta get ready for a radio spot.
All right, see you, man.
All right, Alex, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And there you go. Get Alex B out of here. Appreciate that. So, Money, your thoughts on what this parlay needs to look like?
Yeah, so I can kind of touch on both points together because I think that they are correlated. So McDavid staying away from Barkov with the last change at home. Yeah, if if McDavid is shut down, and the Panthers win, I think that does bode well for Barkov, right? But I don't think at this point anything Barkov does defensively is going to be enough, because
Sure.
we have 5 games now, or especially the last couple of games, where McDavid went off. So Barkov needs to do something exceptional, right? What that exceptional would look like is significant Florida win, and Barkov needs goals, not just one goal. He
Right.
needs multiple goals, right?
Okay.
So if Barkov is going to win this Conn Smythe, he needs a historic performance. I don't even think 2 goals is going to be enough. So if it's a 5-3 Panthers win
Okay.
and Barkov scores 2 goals,
Okay.
it's still McDavid's trophy, right? So I mean, we're looking at like over 2.5 goals, easy, for Barkov to win the Conn Smythe, and Florida blowing them out, and McDavid being shut down.
Well, okay, so that was going to be my sort of tertiary question here: is taking under 1.5 points on McDavid and throwing that into the pool of the same game parlay something that you would consider?
So if you really want to get crazy here, right? Like,
I don't don't get me wrong. I do not want to get crazy. I want to find the minimum that Barkov needs to do for me to get kicked in the teeth when McDavid doesn't win. Right. Okay. So like, while you and I might say to ourselves, like, he needs a hat trick and McDavid has to go pointless and they have to win by like a considerable amount, I would say to be conservative, because it is somewhat of a hedge and I am trying to win both. Like, I would dial it down to like Panthers money line, not Panthers like -1.5. I would dial it down to like, I accept your Barkov needs to probably score more than 1 goal. So over 1.5 goal or multi-goal game. I mean, and right there, those two things together get you better than the Conn Smythe odds. So it should be worth mentioning. That's already better than +400, +450. And then the McDavid under 1.5, which I think is pretty much his standard point total over under. So like those 3 things together like are pretty conservative, and I think are the things that need to happen. The only thing I would be concerned about again is, what if it's Barkov a goal and 2 assists? Right. So like, do I want to go 2.5 points? But then if I go over 2.5 points and he gets the 2 goals, I'm jammed up, from that perspective.
So I think at the very minimum, like the game result does need to come into play, right? So I don't think that Panthers money line is enough. You would need Panthers puck line, right?
Yes, but again, I'm trying to win I'm not trying to get to the nth degree of odds. I'm trying to be as conservative as possible while still, like, I still want, in this circumstance, I still want McDavid to win the Conn Smythe. I just want to have there to be essentially a middle here, a performance middle from Barkov, McDavid, and the Panthers, right? Like, Barkov winning this game in overtime with his second goal of the game, like, the voting thing is always kind of complicated, because it's like they put in a bunch of like the votes with like 5 minutes to go in the game, and then my understanding is like they can change it if like something crazy happens or whatever. Like, maybe you guys know better than I do about sort of the voting when it comes to the Conn Smythe, but like I feel like somebody winning, getting a game-winning goal in overtime would kind of be a pretty big deal when it comes to voting. So I mean, again, I'm trying to find the minimum thing that has to happen for it to be even in the realm of possibility for Barkov to overtake McDavid.
Yeah, so I'd like the very, very minimum. Okay. McDavid needs 0 points, so like under 1.5 points. Okay. And at the minimum, we would need a Florida multi-goal win, right? I think that is at the very at the very minimum range for me. And we do need a multi-point game from Barkov as well, right? I don't think we can strip it down to like 1 or 2 of those things. Like, I think at the very minimum, those 3 things need to happen for Barkov to even be in range.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we need all 3 things to happen. I would just say that those 3 things, again, the multi-goal one is, I think, the one where I would just be like, I would feel better if I just put the money line in versus the -1.5. But
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on those others. It's just how am I going to play the Barkov side of it, and I think yes to including the McDavid side of it for sure. So yeah, so it's very simple 3-legger. Take as much risk as you want to take, but like given the fact that this is a conceptual hedge middle, I want to be a little bit more conservative than like sitting there, worried about 2-goal games and did the Oilers score with 5 seconds left in a 2-goal game because like half the Panthers have their gloves in the air because it's a 3-1 game or something. You know what I mean? Like that would be just the absolute worst if I lost off of kind of like the Leafs was Leafs Bruins, right? And when the Leafs won, and like it's like, oh yeah, the Bruins just scored with 0.1 left, to make it a 1-goal game. They still won the game, Zach. Everybody relax. It didn't change the result of the game or the series. Though admittedly, the goaltender might have got hurt on the play, but still, that would be a rough way to lose that when they're like, oh yeah, Barkov, Conn Smythe, and the Panthers won by 1 goal and you lose 2.
Yeah. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. As for our best bets for today, you can find them over in the BetStamp app in the Find Better section as Edgework HQ. We have one bet, the over 5.5 minus 103. We're taking that for a half unit for tonight's game. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I appreciate everyone who's followed along all year. We're going to say it again. We'll say it every time we do this, just in case. Today could potentially be the last live show of the 2023-2024 season. So if you did enjoy, please hit that like button, subscribe here to the channel. Make sure to follow us on Twitter as well at EdgeworkHQ. But if not, if things go awry for the Florida Panthers, we'll be back here on Monday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. If the Panthers wrap this thing up tonight, that's it for us for this season. We're out of here. I love the show. I love my job more than anything. I love hockey. I'm ready for the season to end. Like June 21st doing hockey shows, it feels like it's just like so long. It's so long. But regardless, we could be back Monday morning. You guys will know based on the results of tonight's game. But for any updates or anything, make sure to subscribe here to the channel or follow us on Twitter at EdgeworkHQ. So Money, Matt, thank you guys very much for taking the time here today to help us break down Game 6, preview Game 6, and talk about Conn Smythe market. Hopefully people got some stuff to take away from as well. Thank you to Alex B, who had to hop off there. But I think today was a pretty good show, boys. I think it was a pretty good show. So thank you very much to everyone who's tuned in. We might see you on Monday. We might not. We'll see. We'll figure it out. But regardless, that would be the last show. Thanks so much to everyone who tuned in. Enjoy the game tonight. Enjoy the Euros. Enjoy the Copa America. Enjoy all the sporting events that are going on. MLB, CFL. Enjoy your life. And let's wrap up the goddamn hockey. Thanks so much for tuning in. Enjoy it. Good luck on your bets.